Welcome to Lit Vibes Only, where we lit the shit out of books we love and hate. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Amanda, and welcome to January's Lit Chats episode, where we're going to be
Woohoo.
diving into what kind of readers we are. But before we get to that, I just want to give you a quick reminder of where you can find us on socials. So you can hop on Instagram and find us at litvibesonly_podcast. And you can check out the video versions of our episodes on YouTube at
Yes.
Lit Vibes Only Podcast. And you can find us on TikTok also at Lit Vibes Only Podcast. We have a blast just creating all sorts of fun content. Goes far beyond what we do here on the podcast. So come check it out. Come hang out with us. Come have a chat.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, see the silly things we're doing over there.
And
it's a great way to engage with us.
A fun tidbit about the YouTube episodes, I've started releasing them actually early. So they are available like the night before. If you're a night podcaster,
Ooh.
you have that extra benefit of getting it early if you want.
Look
as
at
a YouTuber.
That. Early release. I love that.
No
That's
extra
perfect.
like funds needed. That's just a gift I've been giving you
from us to you. I'm curious. I would love for folks to comment because I would love to get a sense from people if they prefer their podcasts in video form or just like traditional audio. Because I have talked with folks on both sides of that. And I'm just curious for like our listeners where they fall. I'm making the assumption that most of you are listening to this on a podcasting platform. Totally. But yeah, I'm curious how many folks enjoy watching their podcast.
It's so interesting. Like I don't pay as much attention to the YouTube channel. Like I could definitely be doing more for our YouTube channel, but then we'll just like get random comments from people and I'm like, who is this? And I'm like, I don't know, but they're watching. I'm like,
yay,
cool.
That's what we want. That's good. I honestly like never check our YouTube channel. Yeah. I'm always so focused on like obviously doing the editing and getting things on the podcast platforms. What kind of comments are people like commenting on like what are they saying?
The last one, oh shoot, I just replied to it like yesterday too. I forget what it was about.
Is it about like are they responding to like stuff in the podcast, like their thoughts on? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yay. We love that.
I think it was the audiobook one. And somebody was saying, they suggested that you say that you're from like a different, like you put in a different address for double library cards so that it helps you get things faster.
Oh, sneaky. I like it.
I know. Some good tips in there.
It's like when my friend told me to put my e-reader in airplane mode so that I can hang on to my books even after they are supposed to go back to the library. That has like changed my life.
I need to figure out how to do that. Like I have a Kobo and so I don't know how to hook it up to Libby. So
you mentioned that on the audiobooks episode.
Yeah.
Well, if you bring it the next time I see you, we can maybe put our heads together and sort it out.
So what are you? A ton of e-readers. E-read books.
I know, me too. I wish I bought more books, but as somebody who lives in an apartment with limited space and who moves fairly regularly, it just makes zero sense for me to like collect hundreds of books. Like it sucks when you're moving. It takes up so much space.
Yeah. It's a huge time and space sucker. Yeah. Like when moving, right? Like look at our bookshelf back here.
Yeah.
Like we can't fit everything anymore.
No.
We need another one.
I know.
And if you watched our last episode, I was in front of a different bookshelf and had different books on it. But these are mostly my like reading books. The other ones are more like very particular genre and stuff. But we're talking about getting another bookshelf.
I feel like in a perfect world, once I get a house, I would love to have, of course, like either like a library or like a reading nook. And I was just watching this TikTok video and this couple made themselves the most gorgeous reading nook. They like built in these custom shelves and every part of me was like, I want that so much. Yes. I am just filled with jealousy. And also I have no idea when that would ever happen. But yeah, and in my perfect future, I would have the ability to just fill lots of shelves with books.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel the same way.
Yeah. But I would say the other thing too, in addition to like space and like the time, obviously if you're moving books from one place to the other, is like it does add up though. like the rate at which I
Oh
read, if
yeah.
I was buying all of the books that I read, like
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like a
Mm-hmm.
paperback is easily 30, maybe $40 depending. And it's, or a hardcover, I'm sorry. And it just, yeah, that adds up real
Yep.
fast.
It does. It does. But
So,
before we get too deep into it, Amanda, what are you
yes.
reading right
Oh,
now?
yes. Okay. Thank you for the reminder. I am actually reading a book that y'all are going to hear about very shortly on our February episodes,
Wait,
which is
what?
Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Sorry, my ring light is like, there we go.
There.
This is a romance
Uh-huh.
that Kelsey recommended. Obviously, in
Uh-huh.
February, we're going to be celebrating Black History Month. Super pumped for that.
Hmm.
And so, this is a book written by a Black woman. It features a Black couple. And although I am not a fan of romance, I am excited to support this author and read this book. And you'll have to tune in February to
Yes, you
find out my
will.
thoughts. I haven't started. I'm actually going to be starting it today. So I'm just
We're
I'm hoping I have a better experience than
I think you will. I don't know. It has a lot of promise, so we'll
I
see.
will
We'll see.
say this will be the first romance I've read. Everything else I've read from Kelsey has been romanticy.
Yeah.
So this will be my first just straight romance. So I'm curious to see if I respond differently. We'll see.
Yes. Well,
What are you reading?
I am reading. I'm actually listening to it,
Mhm.
When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I really
Ooh.
love the cover. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but
Oh, it is pretty. Yeah.
so this over here is like a
Hmm.
dragon, and
Oh.
they have the world. I'm gonna have to reread it. Like I physically read it.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
almost done with it, but I'm gonna have to physically read it because I think I missed some of the world building through audio, and I really
Mm.
want that world building because there's
Mm.
like these creatures and stuff that are described in here
Hmm.
or that are characters in here that I miss like some sort of description or like understanding of like where they come from, who they are. But yeah, it's a very unique world and I'm so here for it. I really like it. And it doesn't
Yeah.
follow the trajectory of like the books that we've read recently, like
Okay.
Akatar and yeah, Fourth Wing.
Hmm.
It's a little different. And so
Hmm.
I like it a lot. And the
Okay.
second book is going to come out this year. So who knows if we'll have it on our reading list or not.
Okay. Is it romantasy or just fantasy?
It is romantasy, but I don't know. It's different.
Is it because is
Like
there
it
smut or is it just
There
like
is, yeah,
okay.
there is. But I don't know. I just feel like it's interesting because it feels like the male character is more focused on that than the female character. That makes sense.
Is the
It's
male
just
characters more
different.
focused on their relationship than the female
The
character? Okay.
romance,
Other
yeah,
okay.
than the female character.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
interesting. She has an interesting background, and I'm here for it.
All right. Well, I'm slightly intrigued.
Intrigued. Until you have to read it.
Until I have to read it. I honestly think if we read
We'll
like a
see.
straight up fantasy, I would
Hmm.
enjoy that so much more than a
Oh, totally.
romantasy.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Let's.
So,
I should find one of those.
do you ever just read fantasy or is it always romantasy?
Yeah, I like fantasy.
Oh, you
Like in
do?
general.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Okay.
The
Well, yeah, if you
fantasy
could just like recommend one
love.
of those. I haven't read any straight fantasy. If you could
Straight
just do
fantasy.
that, I would appreciate it, please and thank you. The thing you mentioned there really quickly before we dive into our conversation today is the thing you mentioned about the audiobook you were listening to and how you're like, oh, yeah, I feel like I missed stuff and I didn't really fully
Hmm.
grasp. Like that would be me all the time if I listened to audiobooks,
Yeah.
especially if it was while I was doing other things.
Hmm.
I think that's why I like just don't listen to them because it would just make the reading experience so much less enjoyable because I would just be like, wait, what happened? Who is this person? How are they related? Why did this just happen?
Yep.
And I would just be frustrated all the time.
I think that this book for sure, if I was just listening to like a romance
Mm-hmm.
or a thriller,
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But then this one, it just has like very specific like world
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
that I'm like, oh my God, I'm intrigued by this world. So I want to
Yeah.
know those
Sure.
details.
Yeah.
I missed it.
Yeah. That's fair.
So
It
yeah.
sounds like it's probably a little bit more like involved
Yes.
than a simple
Mm.
romance or thriller.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we wanted to dive in today and talk about the types of reader that Kelsey and I are, because we are definitely, in addition to having different tastes and genres,
Yes.
I feel like for a lot of the little subtopics we're going to cover today, I think we're also going to end up being on opposite sides, which is going to be fun. So we have a
Mm-hmm.
list of questions to work our way through, and we're going to ask
Let's
them to
get
each
to
other, and we're
it.
both going to respond. And as always, we would love to hear your responses to these. So if you want to take note of these different questions we're going through and want to share what kind of reader you are with us, we would love that so
All
much.
right.
All
We
right.
listen and we don't judge, even
Yes,
though we're
that is,
probably different.
yes, that should become the tagline for our
Yeah, yeah.
our podcast now that that's a thing. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the first question.
Okay.
So, Kelsey, how many books do you read at a time?
So I've tried to do 3 at a time, but I think my sweet spot is 2. Typically, I'll have like an audiobook and then a physical or ebook.
Okay. So you don't ever have two physical books or two e-reader books at the same time.
No, I tried that. And then with the e-reader and the physical book, like I end up like gearing towards one or the other rather than like switching back and
Mm,
forth, you know? So
yeah.
it made more sense to me to just do one ebook. But
Okay.
sometimes I am only reading one. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm definitely like a serial book monogamist. Like I don't cheat on my books with other books. Like if I'm into you, I'm fully into you and you're the only one that I'm paying attention to. I've
My
just
brain just can't handle it.
yeah, I feel like I would be confused and then having to decide which one I'm going to read at that moment versus the other one. I think keeping things straight in my head would be confusing.
Hmm.
And since I don't do audiobooks, I could see that like audiobook and
Yeah.
a ebook or audiobook and a physical book at the same time because they're two different formats. You're utilizing them in
Hmm.
different spaces. For people who do two ebooks or two physical books at the same time, I don't understand both the appeal and how it works. Do you read like one book in the morning and then another book is like your night book? And like,
Hmm.
how do you decide which book to keep going with and which one? You know, like it just
Yeah.
seems overly complicated. So
I
I'm,
also
yeah.
wonder if people, when they say they read multiple books at a time, if they are getting into a book and then stop at some point and then don't pick it up for like a week or two, are they still technically reading that book? You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So they're
I
like,
don't count that.
I don't either because I feel like you've stopped and you've started something else
Hmm.
and then you go back.
Yeah.
But I would be curious, actually. Yeah. How do people define reading multiple books at one time? That's a good
Hmm.
point. I just always assumed like it was happening pretty concurrently, like within the same, day, week.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm definitely one book at a time for sure.
Monogamous reader.
Yes,
That needs to be your
absolutely.
tagline. Okay. We've talked about this a little bit on the podcast,
Mhm.
but tell us a little bit about your speed of reading. How many pages do you get in like an hour?
I actually don't know. I've never timed myself, so I
Ooh.
I couldn't say. I do know that I'm a speedy reader. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, the reason why that really, how do I want to say this? The thing that made me really realize this recently, lots of R's, was when Kelsey and I went to Las Vegas last
God,
February. And
it
we
was,
had
yeah, it
that,
was just
yeah, it was
February.
almost a year ago. Like I said previously on an episode, we were sitting side by side. I was starting a book.
Hmm.
She was already like a third of the way into hers. And I think I caught up and surpassed her in terms of page count.
Yes.
And
It was a
so
while.
so
It's
that
like,
was
what
when I was
the
like, oh,
fuck? I was
and
like,
of
you're gonna
course,
finish
like,
this.
yeah, of course, like it didn't register. Like I'm just reading, right? I'm not like, oh, I'm so speedy.
Hmm.
But I think one of the things that's helped me realize is that now that I obviously ebooks are a thing and I use my e-reader and just the percentage going up quite quickly. But I honestly don't know. I've never tracked how many pages I've read in an hour. Maybe like,
At least
um,
100. Sometimes I really just wish I could have your brain for like a day and just read books. Be like, "Broo, broo,
well,
broo."
that will tie into our next question, which I think is why I'm slightly faster than you.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
because my reading speed, like I have timed myself because I wanted to know. I was like, oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
like I'm a decent reader.
Yeah.
It ranges, of course, between
Sure.
like the books and if
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing an ebook, but it's basically like 30 to 60-ish
Okay.
pages. So it's, yeah, and I think
Yeah.
it's pretty slow.
I feel like that's not the, I don't know. To me, that doesn't
I think it
seem,
is.
oh, I don't know what the average, what is it?
I don't know the
What
average,
is
definitely
the
not over
average
a
reading
hundred.
speed? And also, you have to take into consideration when you're counting pages, like how much text is on the page and
No,
like
totally,
the
yeah.
the fonts.
Which is
So like,
why there's a range.
yeah. So for me,
Hmm.
I would say maybe my range is like probably like 80 to 100. Like, I don't know. I generally have never
Hmm.
timed it, and I feel like I've never timed it because if I knew if I was being timed, it would keep me from reading at my normal speed. Like I would be so like I would be thinking about the clock instead of just like immersing myself. Okay, so definitely different reading speeds for sure.
Hmm.
But I think the reason why ties into this next question, which is
Yeah, this blew
Kelsey,
my mind.
do you read like inside your head when you're reading?
Yes.
That's so weird.
Yes. It's weird that you don't. I don't understand how that's possible. What do you're just looking at the words.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know
Well,
that a
you're
lot of
just,
people do this, but
yeah.
I read in my head.
So you like say each word in your head.
I wouldn't say every word, but like, yeah, a lot of the words.
Okay. Are you someone, do you have like a voice in your head?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I don't. Like I do. And
You're
so
like,
like
there's nothing there. There's no
like I
voice.
don't know, my thoughts don't show up in terms of like a voice in my head speaking. It's just like
Really?
impressions of things. I don't know. And like I think it's why I
Oh my
talk to myself
God.
so much. Like I live alone in like my apartment and I am like constantly talking to myself. And I think it's because I don't have a voice in my head. So I'm like very much a verbal processor. But when I'm
Whoa.
reading, I don't hear the words in my head. I don't know how to describe it. I just kind of like
Yeah.
absorb them.
I know that people do this and I've tried this too. Like I
Yeah.
can do it,
Yeah.
but not for a long period of time, like a
Yeah.
couple pages and I'm just like, "Oh yeah." But then I miss stuff. Like I
Yeah.
do miss stuff even when I'm like
Yeah.
trying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know
it's
how it
wild.
happened. It just, that's just how my brain has always been. So I do think that
Yeah.
definitely connects to my reading speed for sure.
Uh-huh.
But it's funny because if I'm thinking about reading, then I do that. Then I am reading each word.
Yeah.
But if I'm just like letting my brain go and do its thing, then I'm not. I don't
Uh-huh.
know. Anyhow, I would be
I just
so
want to learn that skill. That's all.
yeah, I feel like I didn't learn it, it just happened. But I think you can. And I know there's like different
Yeah.
strategies and like exercises you can
Mm-hmm.
do to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
listeners, I'm so curious, especially for this particular question.
Yeah.
Do you have a voice in your head that you hear when you're
When you're
reading?
reading,
Or
does it just flow
does it just
somehow
like,
into your brain?
yes,
Like sucks
osmosis?
it
I don't know
up.
what the word is I'm looking for. Okay, you can read the next question.
We've kind of talked about this, but do you
Yeah.
ever DNF books?
No, I think in my entire reading career, I've maybe DNF'd one or two books. I think this ties into me being a serial monogamist. I'm just like, once I'm in, I'm committed. Like, I'm committed to this book. I
Yeah.
made a promise. I think part of it has to do with the fact that I am very, and maybe it ties into my perfectionism or just my competitive nature or my, I don't know. I just feel like if I
Mm-hmm.
start something, I'm going to finish it. And I feel like I failed somehow if I started a book and then didn't finish
Yeah.
it. And so, yeah, I do not DNF books. I
Yeah.
push through.
I am somewhere in the middle because I have DNF'd a book, but literally it was one book last year.
Okay. Okay.
Because I ended up pushing through for Bastard of Istanbul, even though it was
Mm-hmm.
not a book that I would have picked up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nor, traditionally. I was trying to early in February, I was trying to expand like my reading, and then I
Mm-hmm.
got stuck on this book and it took me almost a whole year to finish it. And I pushed through that. I started
Mm-hmm.
reading other books like in between. I
Mm-hmm.
also with red paint, I had to push through and I
Mm-hmm.
almost DNF'd that book, but like it was more that was like an emotional book.
Sure.
So, and it was the shortest book I read this year too.
Mm-hmm.
But so I do somewhere in the middle. I DNF'd none of this is oh wait, not none of this is true.
You've
I
definitely read all
wish.
of that.
The Will of the Many. I
Oh, you mentioned
DNF'd
this.
that
Yeah.
book. I
Yeah.
feel like I could go back to that one and try it again, but I did DNF that book, but that was the only one last year. So it was kind of
Okay. Okay. So you're not a big DNFer.
not a big
Okay.
DNFer.
How many, like, in total, like looking at your reading journey, how many would you say you've DNF'd? Is it like more than 10, more than fingers on both hands?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
probably.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. This next question, I feel like we kind of answered in our wrap up because it's just asking how many books do you
Yeah.
read? So
Mm-hmm.
I think we can mostly skip over that. You can listen to our wrap up episode if you want to know how many books we read, each of us read in 2024 and what our goals are for
But I did
2025.
make it to 40 books.
I did see that because I think when we
So
talked,
that was
I was
exciting.
at 53 and you were at 36, I think.
Yeah.
And you're like, I wanted to get to 40. And my
Oh,
goal
yeah.
was to get to 55, which we both did. We pushed through.
Nice.
So those
I'm
were
like
our end of
looking
year
at my.
totals. But let's go to the next question because I think this is a good one. And it came up in a previous episode. Do you reread books?
Yes. I think it's really helpful for me to get back into a world. If I'm in a reading slump, it helps me get back into a world that I love. And so it can
Mhm.
spark that for me. Or I reread them to gather more information because in fantasy, you miss a
Mhm.
lot of like Easter eggs when
Mhm.
you're reading the first time through. And so a second
Mhm.
time through, you just like have these ahas and you're like, oh yeah, like I forgot about that. Or this
Mhm.
was an insight to that. And so
Yeah.
that's fun for me to reread. But sometimes I just want like a comfort read. Like I've read Pride and Prejudice, like I don't know how many times.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So you,
I
Amanda?
I do not reread. I genuinely cannot think of a book that I have reread recently or in like the last 5 years. And we talked about this previously, but novelty is a big thing for me. I know it's a big thing for a lot of folks with ADHD. And it is
Mhm.
hard for me to sit through something that I'm already familiar with when there's like so many new stories and new authors that I could be reading instead. Like my brain is like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? It's the reason, even when I'm traveling to different countries, I'm like, I'm not going to go back to a country I've already been to when I can go to
Whoa,
some
really?
place I've never been before. Yeah, I can count on one hand the number of countries I've revisited. And for me, it's like, even if I liked it and maybe we'll go back someday, it's not going to take priority over some place I've never been because there's like that curiosity and that wonder and adventure and excitement
Mm-hmm.
that a place I've already been it's a known, right? It's a known entity. And even if there is familiarity and comfort there, that
Mm-hmm.
for me doesn't outweigh the new. And so I feel
Mm.
the same way about books. I could see though, if I was a fantasy reader and I read a lot of series like you do, it does make sense to reread because the story is
Mm-hmm.
continuing. You want to refresh your memory. Like you said, you want to go
Mm-hmm.
back and find Easter eggs, and I could see that.
Yeah.
But I don't read series. And it's one reason why if I am going to read a book and that's in a series, I need to read it when the series is complete or nearly complete. So I
Oh
can
my
just kind of
gosh.
go straight through. Yeah.
I'd have such terrible FOMO if I had to wait for the series to be finished.
Yeah, that's fair. I get it,
Uh,
especially because a lot of, the new romantasy series are so popular and everyone's chatting about them.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
did recently, like I only recently read Fourth Wing. Like that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a book that I had read prior to
Mm-hmm.
December. And
Yeah,
so I had waited a while before
you
I got on
did.
board.
Yeah. And
That
now
was
you're
fun.
fully hooked. All
And
right,
cannot wait
next.
for Onyx Storm. By the time this comes out,
It will have been out. Yeah, this is going to be the last week of January.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this is so weird. My future me is going to be so happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thrilling. So excited.
And also heartbroken, likely, from the book. I didn't tell you about this, but I cried so hard at
Well,
the
I
ending
saw
of
your
Iron
TikTok
Flame.
that you made where you're like in tears about
Well,
like before Iron Flame, after Iron Flame.
yeah, yeah. I also videotaped my reactions to the ending of Iron Flame. So I am bawling in that. I just have to edit the video. So that will be
Okay.
coming soon.
As long as there's no spoilers, I'll have to not watch
No
it.
spoilers.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Because I definitely, I'm gonna read all of them, obviously,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah. Anyhow, do you want to read the next question?
Oh, sure. Okay. Where do you read?
Okay. We also kind of talked about this, I think, in a previous
Mm-hmm.
episode, but I have this lovely pink armchair in my bedroom that has great back support and it's also just really comfy. So I typically read in there and it's right next to like this little bookshelf that currently houses sweaters. And so I put my little like tea. I usually have a hot beverage of some kind, like right on the bookshelf next to me. And I always put a pillow on my lap to rest my book on, because it has armrest, but I'm still just like, I don't want to have to hold my book the entire time. So I always have a pillow on my lap. I usually have a blanket as well, because I'm always freezing.
And should send us a picture of your setup.
Oh my gosh, I will. I'll send a cute little picture of my book nook and then my reading nook. And then otherwise I'm on my couch. I can't read on there for like super long periods because it doesn't have great back support. But those are the two spots. What about you?
Anywhere and everywhere. Like, I will read wherever I'm at. Coffee shop. Sasario and I sometimes go just to go read somewhere. And yesterday we were at a restaurant. We were reading together. Like, that was the picture I put on socials of, what was it? Pepper and salt.
A dash of salt and pepper.
Salt and pepper. Yeah. So I was finishing that one. And then I can read in the car sometimes, but not for an extended period of time, which is like part of our next question. But then I'll read at home at the dinner table. I'll read on the couch. I will read in bed. And that's the place that we talked about in our wrap up. Like, I'll read anywhere. I read on the treadmill. Like, I will read anywhere.
Yeah. I guess, okay. I think I understood this question as like, where is like your preferred reading spot? But I also read everywhere. Like, I will usually prop my book up and read while I'm eating dinner. I'll either do that or watch a TV show. But if I'm like fully into a book and I'm like, let me just read.
Right.
Yeah. I'll read on a plane, read at a coffee shop. I do read everywhere. I mean, we can go ahead and answer the question because I think it does tie in. So the other question is, can you and do you read in the car?
Right.
And absolutely, like, it doesn't make me car sick. So I, for sure, if I am being a passenger princess and don't have to drive and I don't need to like entertain the drivers, I will absolutely be reading. Like, I was in an Uber the other day, getting shuttled to the airport, and I was definitely reading my book.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I wish I could read in the car. Like, I can for short periods of time, but then I start getting sick. And as soon as I start getting sick, I'm like, oh, I have to roll down my window and stop. And I can't do it for the remainder of the drive. So that sucks.
That does suck. Yeah. Cause it's like such a good chunk of time to be.
It is. Like, what else am I going to do?
I mean, I guess you could listen to an audiobook since you're an audiobook person.
So when I'm a passenger, typically Cesario is listening to his music, right? And like, I need headphones in order to like do that. So it's like a whole thing.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then I can't hear anything he says. And then I'm like, what? And then that's a whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to ask the next question? I like this one.
So they always say, don't judge a book by its cover, but do you judge a book by its cover?
Oh my God. Abso-freaking-lutely. Honestly, it is one reason why I don't read romances. I just find the covers so silly and cheesy and basic and like nothing about a romance cover appeals to me at all. And it's one reason why I just like an additional reason why I
not all romance covers are the same though.
They're not all the same, but like I'm talking about like this kind of this standard romance. Like if you go to Elliott Bay, right, and you go to the romance section, they almost all look the same. They really do.
Cartoonish.
They're cartoony. They're really brightly colored, and it's generally two people wrapped up in some sort of romantic embrace, and it's got a really cheesy title.
Well, but at least the days of Fabio
are done.
Gone.
Thank goodness. No more Harlequin romance novels. But yeah, I do judge a book by its cover, and I love really pretty covers. It doesn't have to be gorgeous in order for me to read the book, but I definitely find it more compelling. And whether or not I reach for a book to even see what it's about and like get more information about it has a lot to do with what it looks like. So I very much am a book cover judger.
I agree. And I think it was Elliot. I was in Elliot's, this book that you recommended, and you're like, you would love it. Like, it's a fantasy, all those things. But was it Gideon the Ninth?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I can't get past the stupid cover. I hate the cover. And I'm like, I can't read this book. So that's an example of like, I can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just like get a different
It's a crazy
cover.
cover. And the more that I think about it, now that we've like this podcast has been underway for several months,
Yeah.
I'm like, I actually don't know if you would like it.
Oh,
It
okay.
is
So then,
fantasy. I think it might be a little bit too dark for you. And
mm,
it's not, it does have like there's a same-sex couple romance, but it's not a romantasy by any stretch of the imagination.
yeah.
There's no smut in it. And I think you would find it too dark, maybe.
Mm.
But it is a book that I'm curious to know what you think about. So I actually might force you to read it at
Oh
some
my
point.
gosh. Just I
We
can't
shall
look at the
see.
cover.
We
I'll
shall
get it in
see.
e-reader.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could listen to it so you don't have to look at the cover.
Have to look at it every time I open this.
Oh, that's well, no. Oh, I don't know how your
Yeah.
Kobo is set up, but on the Kindle, you don't see the cover every time you open it. It just goes to the last page you read.
But on an audiobook, I do.
Oh, audio. Oh, that's right. I
Yeah.
forgot. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'll have you do an ebook. Which goes directly into our next question, Kelsey.
Yeah.
E-reader versus physical book. Which do you prefer?
I think sometimes I do prefer the e-reader because it helps me get through a book more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not constantly looking at like the pages and
Mm-hmm.
like how much is on each page.
Mm,
So, for example, I was reading Queen of Shadows, and I think I went over this in a different podcast
yeah,
episode,
you did.
but like it's a thick fucking book. And I think just the intimidation factor, even though
Mm-hmm.
I was like maybe halfway through, like I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
get through the rest and I really struggled like getting through it. And as soon as I plopped it on my e-reader, I was like, oh, kept going
Mm-hmm.
and finished it in,
Mm-hmm.
like a week or something. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think sometimes the e-reader is like I gravitate towards that
Mm-hmm.
because of that. But I don't mind reading like actual books.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily have like, oh, I have to have this kind of book or that kind of book, or I don't really have a preference.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
only preference is the length. And if I'm feeling intimidated by it, then, oh, I'd probably go to the e-reader.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that before as like a
Yeah.
reading hack. That makes a lot of sense. I was so anti like e-reader and anti ebook when they first came out and became a thing
Uh-huh.
because I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I love having the hard copy, like a physical copy of the book in my hands to hold. And I love the way that books look and how they smell and how they feel and flipping through the pages and being able to flip back and forth easily and double checking information.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've come to like e-readers just for their convenience, especially when I'm
Mm-hmm.
traveling. The fact that I
Oh,
can bring
right.
10 books with me, right? And it's all in this compact little device
Yep.
is so great. Even on a plane, I hate being that person that turns on the overhead light. And so having an e-reader that's backlit and I don't need to do
Yeah.
that, I just
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate that. The fact that I can, mine's waterproof. I can take it in the pool, which I did last summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate it for convenience. But if I had to choose, like if someone had like a gun to my head and they're like, you have to choose between the two, I definitely love physical books still. Like there's just
Mm-hmm.
something about an actual book in my hands that it holds a special place in my heart. And e-readers
Yeah.
will just never be able to like, yeah, we'll never have that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love a physical book so much.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, but getting into that, like, do you have a
uh-huh.
preference with hardback or paperback?
Oh yeah, hardcover versus paperback. I would say I like a hardcover. It just feels more bookish to have like a hardcover in my hands. I take the book jacket
Mm-hmm.
off because it drives me crazy. Although sometimes I'll use it to
Well,
mark my
yeah.
spot, but having it slide around
Mm,
while I'm reading, like I cannot stand. But it just
absolutely
feels
not.
more like a real book than a paperback, which I know is ridiculous. I think also I like that not real books, hardcovers are more likely to maintain their shape versus paperbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Like the covers can get bent. It's easier
Mm-hmm.
to like crack the spine on a paperback.
Mm-hmm.
And also, depending on how long the book is, like thick books that are paperback, I feel like it's harder to hold them open
Oh,
versus
uh-huh.
thick books that are hardcover. Like you almost always have to like crack the spine so on a paperback that's like 800
Mm,
pages or 600 pages
yes.
because it's so hard to keep them open. It's crazy.
I remember my 1,000-page book this year. And
Yeah, it's
you
just
were like, what the fuck are you?
annoying.
You're just walking around with a brick? Like, but it
It's
was a
so
paperback.
much.
But the thing about a paperback, a thick paperback, and the flop of a paperback, I actually really love that.
Oh, interesting.
It is such a weird thing.
Your
I don't really care
floppy
about the smell
paperbacks.
of the book or like
Yeah.
or anything like that.
Yeah.
Some people are really into that, and you
Yeah.
mentioned that. But like the flop is so fun. Like I don't know why. It's just like look at that flop. Like it's funny.
That is
Oh, really fun.
interesting. Okay. I've never thought about that. I have a paper
Oh
bag here
boy.
that I'm flopping for folks who are watching. I get, yeah, it's definitely got, a little bit of a wiggle to it. But here's the thing, if it's a paperback that's like 300, 400 pages, I'm fine with it. I feel like if it
Mm-hmm.
gets longer than that, I definitely want it to be a hardcover. But like in the grand scheme of things, I'm not like, it's not a huge preference, right? I'm not like, oh my gosh, I
Oh
will not
my.
even touch it
Oh, what?
if it's not hardcover. But I do like them slightly more than paperbacks.
Fair. It's fair.
Okay. So in
Well,
terms
the
of,
thing that I
go
wanted to
ahead, go ahead.
say
Yeah,
about
yeah, jump
hardback
in.
though is I feel like to me, hardbacks are more collectible items rather than reading items. So like when I see books that are like a special edition, they're always
Mm-hmm.
hardback. And the hardback always has like some like something on it, some sort of design,
Mm,
and the sleeve has its own design. And so
yeah.
like it's double designed. And then
Yeah.
you can have like the sprayed edges
Mm-hmm.
and it just looks like really nice. And so I
Yeah.
think about this and I don't like buying tons of copies of books, but some people do. Like they'll buy like
Mm-hmm.
the books like
Yeah.
multiple copies, like paperback and hardback, and then they mismatch and all that. And I'm like, I really want to start buying books in hardback when the series is done so that I can have them all
I see.
like the
Yeah.
same, and so I don't know. That's just been something I've been thinking about.
Interesting. So for you, it's more like they look more like collector's items if they're
Yes.
hardback. Are
Yeah.
you now I'm saying it too. I've never called them hardbacks. I always say hardcover and paperback, but
Oh,
you've been saying hardback, and I'm like,
oh,
oh, I've never heard that before.
I don't know if that's
That
actually a thing or if I'm just saying that.
well, for the purposes of this podcast, a
Kelseyisms.
new Kelsey, so we've got hardbacks, and I mean it makes sense. Hardbacks and
Oh.
paperbacks. Okay, so in terms of reading time, Kelsey, are you someone who reads in short little bursts, maybe scattered throughout the day? Do you just like
Mhm.
sit down for a long stretch of time and just plow through? Like, what kind of?
I feel like what ends up happening is I have small bursts rather than like a long period. On the weekends, I have longer periods of time to read.
Mm-hmm.
But on the weekdays, I'm probably just reading in bed for like 20,
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
unless the book is really good and I can't fall asleep,
Yeah.
which does happen.
Sure.
But I've been trying to be really mindful of my sleep lately.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's good. That's
hasn't
good.
happened in a while. But yeah, so I feel like it's more shorter bursts, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm.
With my audiobooks, like if I'm driving somewhere, then it could potentially be a longer burst. Or I also work out and listen to my books.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess
I
that's
like
where
for
I'm at.
working out, especially if you're doing weightlifting, I don't understand how people do that. Cause I'm like, how are you counting your
Really?
reps and also listening to an audiobook like that? My brain would not
Come
work. Like, or like I wouldn't be paying attention to my form as much if I was like trying to track what was happening with a particular character. I'm like, oh, right, I
Oh,
need to like,
yeah.
yeah, I
I
don't know.
can't do these two things.
Honestly I'm pretty good at multitasking, but I think because again, I have to work so hard to focus on things that are auditory. It's
Mm-hmm.
not something I'm good at multitasking in that way. But
Yeah.
I would say for me, I tend to be a longer burst person. Like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to read, like I'm going to read, right? I've carved out time and I'm going to like
Yeah.
sit down and do the thing. So usually for me, I'll try to like carve out in the evenings, depending on what's going on in my life, like at
Mm-hmm.
minimum an hour. Like I rarely read for less than an hour, unless again, I'm like quickly reading like a chapter while I eat dinner, in like
Yeah.
15 or 20 minutes. But yeah, for me, I'm like, all right, I'm settling down. I've got this chunk of time and then I'll go forth from there. So I'm not a short burster at all.
You know,
Unless
oh
oh go
yeah.
ahead. No, I was just gonna say unless folks consider an hour a short burst, that
I
I
feel like maybe hour is the like start of a long
yeah,
burst.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think that counts as a long burst.
yeah.
I know I would like to start scheduling my time with reading so that it's just like on my calendar so that I can like just dedicate that time
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I do want to spend more time reading.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the other thing that I was going to say is I saw this video recently about someone with ADHD getting ready for the day
Mm-hmm.
and saying why they're always late for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like brushing their teeth and watching like a Netflix show, right? And like eating and watching
Oh,
something and
I
like
saw this. I
getting
saw
ready.
this one.
And I was
Yeah.
like, that is absolutely me with a book. Like I'm just sitting there like I'm I'm brushing my teeth and I'll be reading and like out the door I'm like reading, but
Oh,
then I have to close it, you know, and then I get it's that's that's my life.
interesting. I used to be like that when I was younger. Like when I was in like, middle school, high school, like I had a book with me a lot of the
Oh
time. So
yeah.
I'd be walking around with it.
I
I'd be
see
doing,
my students like that too.
yeah. And yes, oh yes, I have students who do that too. But I don't do that so much anymore, actually, now that I'm an adult. And I think partially it's because I have carved out reading time each
Sure.
day, or I
Mm-hmm.
try to, depending on my schedule. And I don't know. I don't like getting interrupted once I'm in it, especially if it's a book I'm really
Uh-huh.
into. I don't want to start and
Yeah.
like, okay, I know I only have 20 minutes and I'm going to be interrupted or I have to go do something. That bothers me. So I'd rather like get all the stuff done I need to get done
Mm-hmm.
and then be like, okay, it's just me and the book.
I know. See, I think that whenever I am doing that, and I'm like, but I just want to read it. I was like, Kelsey, you could just like get the dishes done and then just read.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yes.
no.
Yes. And I used to be like that. Like I couldn't control like that, I don't know, impulse. I was like, I have to do it all right now. And now I'm like, nope, get this done. And your reward will be like a cup of tea and your reading time. So that has helped a lot. Okay, two more questions. And these have to do with
Yeah.
chapters. The first question is, if a book has chapters, well, most books
Mm-hmm.
do. If they don't have just numbers for the chapter, they have a
Mm-hmm.
chapter title. Do you read chapter titles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you?
I don't normally read them. I'm just speeding right along and I'm like, there's nothing important in the title. Like whatever the title is talking about, I'm gonna find out in the content of the chapter. So let me just read the chapter. Like, why would I waste my time?
I like figuring out the relevance of the chapter
Mm,
titles though,
yeah.
too. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't skip something though. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
no, I
really
definitely
strange.
I get really like when I'm in the zone and I'm just like plowing through a book, I
Uh-huh.
nothing like will derail me. And because I have deemed them as irrelevant, I'm like, why am I gonna waste my time and break my flow by
Yeah.
reading this chapter title that serves no purpose? The only time I read chapter titles is if either someone indicated to me beforehand or the author made it really clear, like there's something I should be looking for in the chapter titles that's going to enhance
Mm-hmm.
my reading experience, then I will. But otherwise, I'm like, okay, you just came up with a random title because you felt like you needed to have a title when the
Maybe they
like
are
the
useless.
yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Sometimes they serve a purpose and there's like extra stuff there. It does help frame it in some way,
Mm-hmm.
but I usually find them unimportant.
So interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my thoughts on chapter
Uh,
titles.
and like the final point we have or we want to make around differences is when you're reading the chapters, right?
Hmm.
Do you prefer or do you care whether or not they're short or long chapters?
Honestly, I have never really thought about it until I saw some recent TikTok videos where folks were getting into it. I think honestly, if it's a book that I'm not enjoying, I
Mm-hmm.
prefer short chapters because it
Mm-hmm.
does make me feel like, okay, this book is moving along. I'm getting through it. Like
Yeah.
it helps to break up like the monotony, especially if it's like a long, slow-paced book. It makes it feel like, I'm getting through it. If it's a book that I'm super into, I don't care what length the chapters are. Like they
Mm-hmm.
could be long, they could be short. It is irrelevant. But I guess the only time it matters is, yeah, if it's a book that I'm pushing myself to get through that maybe I shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
enough. I do
Yeah.
appreciate seeing the end of a chapter in sight.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I
Okay.
I don't necessarily want short chapters in a book I love, but
Hmm.
like they are extremely helpful in books that I'm like struggling through.
Yeah.
So like Bastard of Istanbul, like they had long ass chapters and I was like, oh dear
Mm.
God.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if
It
like
was
you're like
painful.
reading and you're like, okay, I'm gonna stop once I get to the end of this chapter.
Yeah.
And it's a book, it's already a book you don't like. You're like, oh my gosh, that means I still have like 15 more pages to slog through to get to the next like milestone.
Hmm.
It's
15
definitely
pages is
rough.
hard to
I
get through
know.
when you're like,
Not enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just should
Yeah.
DNF books more often, I think. I just felt bad with that one.
I think the reason too I don't DNF them because then it kind of feels like time wasted. Like, oh, I already committed. I got halfway through
Yeah.
this book and now I
You
can't
don't get
count
to
it for
count
any.
it.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like I just
just
wasted
time
all of those
wasted.
hours and they were meaningless. So I think it's the other reason. Because honestly, The Vegetarian, which I read last year,
Yeah.
and I did not like, and it was only 188 pages.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I really just want this to be over. And if I was a DNFer, I probably would have DNF'd it. But I was like, you know what? I'm already in it. It's not that long of a book. It'll add to my book count at the end of the year. I just stuck it out. Yeah.
I saw that one in a bookstore and I was like, God, I wonder if I would like this one.
You would hate it.
Really?
Like you would hate The Vegetarian so much.
Now
like
I just want to prove it.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's only 180
It's only 180 pages.
I would be shocked. I feel like I need to put
it.
money on this. I would be so shocked if you were like, yes, I read it and I
loved it.
Yeah, or even if you just liked it, I would be so surprised.
Really?
It's so not a you book at all. It's like super literary. It's super esoteric. It's kind of
I don't mind esoteric, I don't think.
Okay. I just found it really confusing and like I don't like books that seem like, what is the word? Is it self-obsessed that are just like think too much of themselves? Like, oh my gosh, look what I'm doing. I'm so cool.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it felt like a Pulitzer Prize winning book in the worst way. For me, I'm so sorry, Hong Kong. Like it's really, it's not a poorly written book. It just wasn't for me. And maybe I wasn't in the right headspace for it. But anyhow, tangent. Don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now. But yeah, so that's a little bit about us as readers.
Yes.
Definitely
are you
different on a lot of fronts, but similar on some others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll have to tell us like what they think and
what
kind of readers they are.
Please give us your reading profile. Again, if you're listening on Spotify, you can comment directly on this episode and let us know what category you fall in for those different questions.
I'll have to come up with like a post where it like
for sure
shows Amanda being what is it called?
A monogamous reader.
And Kelsey being slutty reader.
You're polyamorous. What we could do actually is we could take these questions and put them in a post and have folks respond too if folks want to. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. I really enjoy these Lit Chats episodes just because they're like a little bit more freeform and we can talk about things that very directly relate to us and our reading experiences. But if there are bookish topics that you'd love for us to cover on a future Lit Chats episode, please comment and let us know. You can send us a message on TikTok or Instagram because we definitely want to talk about topics that are also important to you guys and that you're discussing amongst yourselves so we can add to that conversation. Do you want to do socials to close us out, Kelsey?
Definitely. So remember to come rate and review us on any major podcast platform and find us on Instagram at litvibesonly_podcast or on YouTube or TikTok at litvibesonly_podcast. And again, it's so important to podcasts that you rate and review so that we can get traction and other people can see us. We would love that. And thank you so much.
Share the book love with more people.
Yeah. You're enjoying it. Come on.
Yeah, love it. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in and we'll see you next Monday.
See you next Monday.
Bye.